YouTube, Untitled Chapter, welcoming you back to another action figure review. So I'm sticking with my 40k Space Marine reviews for a little while, because I have a few of them that I picked up that I want to go through. And the second one, hopefully if this is uploaded at the right same time, the second guy I'm going through, and you may have seen him in the previous video, again if this is all in the right sequence, is the High Marshal Helbrecht from the Black Templars. So this is essentially the big boss guy of the Black Templar chapter. He is a more up-to-date version of the older version of him, where he had kind of regular artificer power armor. This is the new Rubicon version, where he's gone through the Primaris upgrade, so he has a few differences between the old one and the new one, but essentially he's pretty much the same. But he comes in this newer style box. So the older boxes had just all black border and didn't have the white on it or the pictures from the kind of 40k rulebook. But you have an image of him with his helmet on, which is kind of nicer than the version that I have here at the moment, because the standard default for this guy is, on the miniature at least, is without the helmet. I'm not sure if the miniature comes with the alternate version head for this guy, because again, he's a named character. Most of the character models for 40k, you generally tend to have a helmeted head, even though, like, obviously you're not going to go walking around in a battlefield without some sort of armor on your head or for your head. But they opted to give him, I think it is a unique helmet for him. I don't think it was used anywhere, and as I said, I don't know if it comes with the miniature kit. I don't have the kit for this particular guy. I do collect Black Templars, but I haven't really gotten into much of the Primaris stuff. I started collecting back in 3rd edition when Black Templars are kind of a big deal, because they were depicted on the cover of the box for 3rd edition. But the High Marshal is one of the figures I don't have. I have like the regular Marshal figure, which is just a kind of a captain with alternate parts, but I don't know if this guy has all the same stuff. So box shows him on the back of what you get. He has some really cool stuff, and he's not too big on accessories, in the sense that he only really has a gun, the head, and a extra set of hands. He doesn't have like 2 extra sets of hands like some of the other characters do. So he's fairly plain, but what makes up for that is his paint deco is fairly unique to this character. And he has a really cool Bionic arm sculpt, which is not a kind of standard Space Marine thing. So he does have some really cool stuff. So one of his loose accessories is this chain with or these things called again, they're like the incense, yeah, that's the right stuff. It's like one of those things that holds incense that you see priests would use, and it's like spreads out all that stuff. It also looks like a kind of lantern, which, whatever way you want to think of it, it goes onto his arm. It holds better when the gun is in place, but it just sits on his arm. It looks a little bit weird in certain positions, but it is there. He comes with his big ass sword, which is really cool. And he has, now it's a non-functioning thing because it looks like it clasps around it, but it is actually a molded piece. It goes over, in fact, I believe it came on him. His sword is separate, and you have to push the little pegs on the side of this clip, but this piece that's on his arm was already attached in the box. He comes with the kind of standard Space Marine backpack. Again, this was attached on the box because it's part of his sculpt that goes onto his shoulder. His backpack was separate, I believe, and it has this really nice ornate iron halo design on it, which has skulls. It's a bit kind of impractical in the sense that it has this big skull thing, and then it has these candles on either side. A lot of Space Marine characters tend to have like weirdly designed stuff like candles and things like that on them, especially Black Templars, which kind of makes no sense, because if they were actually lit, they'd actually go out straight away the minute they're walking around, unless they're made of some sort of special candle material that just continuously burns, which is possible. They are big space marines after all, and kind of space fantasy stuff, sci-fi stuff. But these guys, the deal with the Black Templars is they take a lot of their kind of lore from the Crusades, which wasn't a really great period in time, but they have that kind of, you know, the Iron Cross kind of motif going on. They're basically known for going around taking out heretics, and if I remember correctly, they're not a first founding chapter, they're a secondary chapter, and I believe the Imperial Fists were their primary founding chapter. These guys are a secondary chapter to the Imperial Fists, if I remember my lore correctly. Maybe someone in the comments below will correct me, but I believe they're a kind of second generation Space Marine chapter. He has these cool skulls on his shoulder pad that has, they're kind of attached on these chains. The chain doesn't move or anything, it's part of the sculpt, but it is really nicely done. He has purity seals all over him. He has basically seals all over him, and they are quite nicely sculpted. He has a little bit limited articulation, but most of it is fairly intact. His weapon is this mastercrafted Melta combi weapon, Melta bolt gun, which is quite nicely done. And he does have two alternate hands, so he has a better grip hand for the sword. I just have his basic pistol grip hand in. I didn't want to swap it out, and it still holds in fairly well with just the basic grip hand. These are the default hands that he comes with. So he has a pistol grip hand for the left and right, and then he has kind of grip hands for the left and right. Difference being is because his right hand is a bionic arm, you have this robotic hand for his right hand, and then you have the standard marine hand for his left hand. So he does have his ugly fugly head on, which I am not a big fan of. In fact, I'm going to pop this off, hopefully, and put on his helmeted head because it's so much better. His helmeted head just looks way more menacing, more nicer. His standard head, the skin tone on it, I'm not a big fan of. He, see if I can zoom in on it. It looks like he needs to go for the bathroom very badly. This is exactly how the miniature looks. It's supposed to be grimacing, but it just doesn't translate well to an action figure, I don't think. And I think it's the reason why they gave you the alternate helmet head, so you don't have to be staring at this ugly fugly head all the time. But it is a nicely sculpted head, and I think the paint job for the skin tone is just what throws it, because it looks very washed out. It doesn't have a very lifelike look to it. If I just bring in like other Joytoy figures, I believe this is Joytoy, you can see the skin tone on this looks a lot more lifelike, whereas this just looks very pale and pasty. In fact, if I bring in the old Black Templar, the old Marine Librarian head, skin tones are very different. This is a more peachy skin tone. This is very washed out from the look of it. But all in all, he is quite nicely done. So his arms do move. You mightn't get full 360 on him because of the way his arms are sculpted. He does have a double elbow on his left, but because his right arm is unique, it only has a single elbow joint, but it gets a good 90 degree. It still has the swivel in it, and it has that ball peg. Now, you just have to be careful when you're moving it around, because this piece is designed to move with the sword. But again, as I said, you are going to have limited articulation in some points. He does hold his melted gun fairly nicely. It's just quite heavy, but he does hold it decently enough in his left hand. He has waist articulation, but again, because he has this tunic piece on, it does limit it compared to other figures. And he does have a waist swivel, but you have to move the whole tunic as part of it, because I believe this whole piece from here up to here is one part that is over kind of a standard Space Marine buck. He does have those, does he? I believe, yeah, they do move. The exhausts on his backpack do move just like the standard Space Marine. It is a kind of semi-standard Space Marine backpack. It just has these extra ornate pieces all over it, but for the base part of it, it is a kind of fairly standard or fair. And then you have his legs, which are unique enough to him because he has these really nicely armored leg shells, which is really cool. I don't believe anyone else uses these. In fact, I don't think any of the captains or the Primaris captains have any of these ornate legs. But he does have the thigh swivel. He can kick forward and back. Not so much. Can kick forward a decent bit, but his tabard does get in the way. He does have the jeweled knees, but again, his cloak and bits on him do tend to kind of get in his own way. But other than that, he isn't too bad. Oh, and there's one other accessory which I failed to mention, which I'll do in a minute. He does have peg holes on the bottom of the feet, and he does have the rocker ankles, and he has that toe articulation. And the other accessory that I almost forgot about, because it's newer for some of the newer figures, is Joytoy have started putting these display bases, clear plastic display bases, in with these figures, which is a nice nod for any of the figures that are fairly top heavy or fairly cumbersome. So I'm just see if I can plug it into his foot. There's only the one peg on these, so you have to push it in the right way. But it's almost as if you have the old round 32mm round base, or whatever little round base these guys use for the actual game system, but it does fit into the on fairly nicely. Show his thingy, this lamp thing back on him, and give him his gun back, so he does look fairly menacing. Detailing wise, he is quite nicely detailed, and paint apps I haven't had any issues with, even though I know the face paint is fairly poor. That is the way he's mass produced. It's not a misprint or anything. I've seen other people with reviews of this guy and he looks like that. I think a wash might make this bit better, which after this review I'm going to try and do a wash. I didn't want to do it beforehand in case it just went horribly wrong and it wasn't the same stock head that he comes with default. So I'm going to give his noggin, the unhelmeted noggin, a bit of a wash and see if that improves the overall skin tone of it. But he's not one of my favorite head sculpts. As I said, he looks like he's in pain or something, or he's needing to go to the bathroom, or he's trying to push kidney stones. So, like, even this guy, this is one of the other Marine heads that have a kind of grimace on it. It still looks better than this for some reason. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's scaling maybe. But here's one of the Ultramarine Space Marines. And you can see Helbrecht does stand a good bit taller than him. We'll bring in one of his Black Templar brethren. Here is one of the shield. Is it shield? Blade guard? Shield guard? Either way, he looks pretty cool next to anyone that's from his similar chapter. And we'll bring in another standard Black Templar. This is the Assault Intercessor, the basic guys. And he looks pretty damn nice next to him. If I dug out all my Black Templars, he probably would look pretty good leading the whole lot of them at the very front, or even behind him. But because Space Marines are Space Marines, they tend to be up front in close combat and not hiding behind the enemy lines, or not hiding behind enemy lines, but hiding behind their own lines miles away. Most of the character model or characters in the 40k universe tend to be fairly upfront in the melee, straight into combat. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this quick video review for the High Marshal Helbrecht figure. He is a good figure despite his slight flaws, especially that head sculpt. I'm not a big fan of it. As I said, some people might be a fan of it. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it just looks a bit too washed out skin tone wise. It's nearly on par with how the Chaos heads looked, the Chaos Space Marine heads, and I wasn't a huge fan of those either. They just looked too pale. I know they were aiming to kind of copy the figures or the miniatures, but I just think it looked a bit too much. And actually, just before I go, I'm just going to bring in 3¼ inch or 4-inch scale figure. So you can see scaling of him, bringing good old Mean Machine, and you see how big the 4-inch scale figures fit to this guy. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video review of Helbrecht. Again, a really cool figure. He should be available in most places now. I got mine from, I believe I got mine from Locker Toys, actually, as opposed to, or not, it's now LT Cave. It used to be called Locker Toys. I got mine from there, and which was handy because they do a reward system. So every time you buy stuff there, you get a couple of points. And I was able to snag the next figure that I will hopefully review, or if you're watching this in sequence, will be the Chief Librarian Tigerius from the Ultramarine chapter. So good figure, do recommend him. If you're not a big fan of the head sculpt that he comes with normally, you can always have this helmeted head on him, and he is pretty good. So there you go, guys. I'm going to leave that here. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. And I hope you have a great day. Cheers, guys.